Hi again guys, and welcome to another best of countdown for Gran Turismo 6, and like many of the other best of lists that I've done, this is not a countdown in as much as best to worst or worst to best. This is just a selection in random order of 15 of the best cars which are great within this category. And as you'll have seen from the title, of course, this particular category is my pick of the 15 best all-round choices of American car, that's specifically North America, so including Canada as well, using the in-game area map. And as such, there are 14 American cars here and one Canadian car. Now, this is my pick of the best vehicles, not just the fastest vehicles. So you have to take into account value for money, affordability, how good the handling is, how quick they are in a straight line, how useful they are as well, and of course how beginner friendly they are, but at the same time how good they are for professional drivers. So let's get straight into the list. Kicking us off, first of all, I'm putting the Dodge Charger SRT8. In particular, this is of course the sedan version of the Charger, and the reason why I'm including it is because it's so much cheaper than many of the big Euro super saloons, and although it's not quite as quick as some, like the Mercedes C63 for outright speed, what the Charger offers is a very competitive all-round package of surprisingly good handling, great visual upgrades, a low price, and of course, very strong straight line performance. Next up, I'm putting a staple of the American supercar class, the Ford GT. In real life and in pretty much any game that it's featured on, it's usually one of the quickest cars you can get. When you tune it, it gets even better. The great thing about the Ford GT is because of the fact that it is based on a racing model originally, the GT40, it carries down some of that DNA, especially in terms of aerodynamic design and the layout of the car, which means that it handles itself remarkably well for a street car, even up against full-on race cars. Next up, I'm including more of a Euro-style American vehicle. This is the European wing of Ford with the Ford Focus RS, essentially a WRC car for the street. It doesn't unfortunately have all-wheel drive, but that being said, for front-wheel drive cars, it's basically the best one in the game for all-round ability and value. The handling is fantastic, it's ultra-light, affordable, and it's basically one of the most OP cars you can get on Gran Turismo. Next up, we go to America's super sports class with a car that I absolutely love, the Corvette in general, but specifically I'm putting the C7 Stingray on the list. And the reason why is because not only is it cheaper than most of the other Corvettes, but it's also faster than most of the other Corvettes. You're looking at incredible top-end performance which can easily rival much more expensive supercars from a vehicle that costs barely over 50 grand. The handling also happens to be fantastic, and so is the fuel economy. It's quite simply a brilliant all-rounder. Next up on the list, probably annoying to some people, but for good reason, I'm featuring the Tomahawk VGT car, but not the Tomahawk X. Many people will expect that car to be here, but no, because it's useless. You can only race it to show off against other Tomahawks or Red Bulls. That is such a niched category. This car, the Tomahawk S on the other hand, can be detuned to a much more realistic 700 pp level. It can take on race cars, it can take on supercars, and for its power, it's one of the most performance efficient vehicles in the game. Next up, our first foray into classics on this particular list, the 1959 Corvette Stingray Racer concept. If I remember correctly, I think you can win this car in career mode, and even if you do opt to instead buy it for 500,000 credits, it's still 500,000 well spent. It's a premium, and although the handling is a little bit more boatish than you'd probably like, and it's certainly not the quickest around a track, in a straight line, it is actually one of the quickest classic cars in the game at around 270 to 280 miles per hour without the use of NOS or slipstream. It can literally take on Cobras, GT40s, and even Chaparrals. And speaking of Chaparrals, we return again to the Vision GT program for what is probably many people's favourite Vision GT car, the Chaparral 2X. In terms of imagination, none of the other VGT cars even come close. It's laser powered, sounds like a gas turbine, so definitely gets my vote, and it's monstrously quick, not just obviously in a straight line, but also around a track. In fact, for its power, there's very little that can come close. Next up, we move into the truck category for a very significant vehicle. Not as quick as many of the others on this list, but very significant, because the Chevy Silverado SST concept is not only the most powerful of any truck or SUV in the game, but more importantly, it is the fastest truck in the game. It's not as quick as some of the SUVs, but it is the quickest pickup truck nonetheless. For our next pick, we return to a legend, really, an icon of Gran Turismo, the Viper GTSR Team Orica. Unfortunately, we don't have the blue and white version on the game anymore, which was personally my preferred version of the Viper Orica, but this car is nonetheless brilliant. One of the quickest GT class race cars in a straight line. It has one of the highest PP levels of any front-engine rear-wheel drive car in the game, and overall, don't be fooled by the massive engine and straight line speed. It is deceptively good around corners and very, very competitive. Next up, we return, like the Chevy Silverado, to the sports utility category. This time though, more specifically to SUVs. This is my favourite SUV in the game. I've mentioned it before, it's one of the best sleeper cars on Gran Turismo, and the fact that this vehicle is essentially the SUV equivalent of a Nissan GTR is attested to by the fact that for 650 horsepower fully tuned, it can outrun most cars off the line and around corners. The fact that it weighs about the same as a WRC rally car really helps it out a lot. Then on top of that, you have to include the fact that for 55 grand, it completely blows the Range Stormer and the Pikes Peak Quattro out of the water for value for money. Next up, what could easily seem to be a much more humble choice of vehicle for the list, but a deceptively potent one. The Dodge, or SRT, SRT4 version of the Neon. This is a car which could easily be just okay, but this isn't just okay. It's a monster, a 560 horsepower, 230 mile per hour, front-wheel drive, compact sedan. That may sound niched, but in its niche, it's quick. Really quick. For our next pick, we move back into the super sports, exotic kind of territory for the 100 grand ViperACR. This is hugely popular, widely loved, and has one of the highest PP levels of any street car in the game. It's actually one of the very few road cars that can go above 700 PP. That is serious territory, and there's a reason for that. It can take on LMP cars, and in some cases, it can beat them. For our next pick, we move into the classic muscle category, again for a vehicle which I've extolled the virtues of before on the channel. Not only is it, alongside a couple of others, the cheapest muscle car in the game, at 30,000 credits, but it's also one of the best muscle cars in the game. You're looking at around the same kind of top speed as the Jay Leno Oldsmobile and the Red Devil Camaro, but in a car which is much more unassuming. It doesn't shout, it doesn't show off, it just gets the job done. Our next pick now brings us to, as I alluded to in the outset of the video, the only Canadian car on the list, the HPA Motorsports aftermarket tuner version of the Volkswagen Golf. This is a car which I've always loved on Gran Turismo. It used to be a lot cheaper, but even now, it is still by a big margin the fastest hot hatch in the game in a straight line. None of the other hot hatches even come close to how high the top speed of this car can be. Well over 250, especially with the use of NOS and slipstream, and although, yes, it does suffer from turbo lag at low speeds, it's more than fast enough to make up for that. And last, but most definitely not least, my most respected and probably most loved race car of all time, the Chaparral 2J. Anyone who knows anything about the Chaparral 2J at least respects it, if not loves it. It's one of the most OP race cars ever made. It was banned after one season, and thanks to fan car technology, it was around 30 or 40 years ahead of its time. It's one of the best race cars in the game, and has been since its inclusion in Gran Turismo 4. So that's it for my top 15 pick for the American cars of Gran Turismo. And what would your picks be? Be sure to slap those down below, and of course subscribe for more lists like this in the future, and that we've already done. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.